In trying to understand, because understanding is a humanist adventure. Um, the evangelical mind thwarts understanding. But in trying to understand the decision making processes of the NAACP, who put up a white supremacist from the Green Party promoting Joseph Goebbels, named Will Zell, as a behavioralist who was part of the Jewish Defense League in a cover-up operation concerning the murder of senior faculty at Pitt. Asked to be evaluated despite the fact that understanding and comprehension is thwarted by the evangelical mind, who puts forward that it was a diversion program to prevent harm to Leslie Katz, a cowhooves program of gnawing to get the intensity of rejection out of the cunt lapper. Queer ball, a provincial norm in Pittsburgh public schools. To understand is a humanist adventure, and I will make an attempt to show you where you can actually understand what these maniacs arrived at and how they got away with it. How they got away with it, we'll look at Albert Einstein for a moment. Albert Einstein had to make a decision about whether to endorse the Manhattan Project. Leo Szilard convinced him that there was a race against time before Weasler got hold of one. So, sadly and reluctantly, he signed on to the Manhattan Project. Authorities do make mistakes. In fact, it's one of the reasons why respectable people sometimes refuse to take on authority. They don't want to be left, despite their expertise, in a position of making a wrong decision on the basis of faulty information. What happens then is that mountebanks rush to fill in the void. Authorities do make mistakes, but the criminal insanity of the mistakes that have been made directed at me are far too willful and deliberate, incessant, and even brain damaged to overlook. I have explained many times that the murderers poisoned me in a way that was intended to induce aggression, and yet aggression is dormant. It never took place. These murderers were so determined to extrude by force and neurohypnosis a threat that they could use to justify themselves, that 20, 30 years after the so-called crisis of rejection, when I reacted against their claim that Leslie's lascivious behavior towards me was a legitimate provocation to what I consider date rape. These people who said that it was necessary behavioral modification diversion on Mount Desert Island murdered, Ripper murdered, stabbed to death a girl because I refused to threaten somebody. I refused to raise my fist. They needed a threat. The circumstances surrounding their so-called threat was when my face was smashed with a basketball and my glasses could have been broken. I went home and left a note to myself of what I would have said, what I wanted to say to the asshole that did it. I showed it to somebody a long time later. While I was at home in my pajamas, I showed it to a friend for anger management. It was clearly a forwarded message. It had been written to myself. It was forwarding a message that had been written to myself. He went on to work with the people who poisoned me in the heart, left me castrated and given Parkinson's disease without any remorse because he's raising a family. And I forgave him. The murderers in question had themselves actively gaslit the claim that I was being castrated for lack of manhood, for lack of performance, for lack of endorsement, their claim that it was lascivious incitement. I refused. My letter to Leslie was, you shouldn't put me in the position of demasculinizing me because of my restraint, and women in the position of this atrocious machine at the University of Pittsburgh who want date rapists to get away. And it was all hardwired up into Her Majesty's program of promoting a brutal NEVA corporation invasion of Pittsburgh public schools through corrections with the help of the KGB, called back in the USSR. They brutally kidnapped and tortured me as part of a program from corrections. Forgive me, but that's criminally insane. And the inability to understand it is brain damaged.